that went down. Now, I know there's always the thirst for conversations involving realignment, and I do think that there is obviously schools from the Pac-12, all of them have made it clear that they would like to see the numbers before they make any decisions. However, sometimes you can still stray, and you wonder if that is happening. Secondly, there was Jim Williams sent me a note over the weekend about how he felt like Apple Plus and a couple of maybe linear type networks were going to be involved. I have not seen any news on that, but I appreciate Jim sending that to me over the weekend, and that got a lot of play. And then some even he made that. It was pretty good news if you think about it, just that there's going to be a deal. Again, he's not reporting that, but said he had talked to somebody who contacted Apple Plus. And then there was some taking shots at him like, why do you want the Pac-12 to fail? Which we've discussed, and we're not going to go down that we're not going down that road today. And Jim was like, I'm just giving you information and passing it along to you because it is like either you're a red state or a blue state. But Kirk Schultz to John Wilner, who covers the Pac-12 for the San Jose Mercury News and also the Wilner Hotline. Craig, you read most of it, but there's a couple of quotes. He was talking about why has this been delayed? This is not breaking news, but it makes sense, and we've discussed it. If you said when would be the worst time in the last 6 years to try to renegotiate or negotiate a media deal, probably the last 5 months is pretty close to the worst.
That's what I've been saying. I mean, and all but a few of those things are completely not related to the Pac-12, other than the fact that there's going to be output of money somewhere, and they don't register on the priority of any of that. They're one of those things that after you get down the list of, did we take care of this? Did we take care of that? Have we settled this? Have we settled that? This merger, that merger, strike here, that, there's another one coming after that one maybe. And all down the line, when you turn around and you're like, okay, what do we do with the Pac-12 now? It's the uncertainty in the economy, the layoffs in the tech sector and other places. Yeah.
It's the environment.
Yeah, there's so much going on. So yeah, well, then okay, now they want their money now. Well, I think we're kind of capped out, so here's what we can do for them. And
here's one more quote, then, Craig, your response. I know at least one of the partners, this is from Kirk Schultz at Washington State, we're talking to said, we're ready to sign today, but the optics of us announcing that we're laying off X number of people and we signed a multi-million-dollar deal with the Pac-12 are just not the best, so we're going to have to wait 6 weeks. Now, I don't know if that was 6 weeks as of last week or 6 more weeks, or we've heard, of course, at the end of May, then June. Of course, that timeline has been pushed back on multiple occasions, it seems like, based on what other presidents have said throughout the last 6 months.
Yeah, to be clear, I didn't read anything. I listened to the whole interview.
Oh, okay.
I listened to every single bit of it, and I was especially curious. Dennis Dodd had put out a tweet saying, here's Kirk Schultz with some interesting stuff, and I looked at Dennis's mentions and had, your typical tribalism from either side, and this is, again, one of those you read what you want to read or you hear what you want to hear type of things, and I went into it with, no leanings one way or the other. I know some people might scoff at that, of course you're looking at it from the Big 12, but, we're talking about this I'm not looking at it from a Big 12, go win, go destroy them, view. I know some are, I'm not. I maintained that this entire time, and so I went in there and listened to that entire hour with as clear and unbiased, a mind as I possibly could, and having seen some comments or headlines prior to that suggesting that all this outside noise is complete phooey and he completely erased any thoughts that there's anything wrong. No, that's not true. I didn't walk away thinking that they're totally fine and nothing at all is potentially going to happen. And then, I didn't see as much, but on the other side of they're totally screwed, I didn't walk away with that feeling either. I walked away with the same feeling I've had basically the entire time of what's the TV deal look like, and that's going to determine what happens to the Pac-12. Bottom line. I mean, he talked about a lot of different things. I think one of the most interesting things is how much it kept circling back to the academic side and how much a conflict athletics, especially big money athletics, is to the mission and the ideas and the future of the Pac-12. And it just makes me wonder of if there's that drum beating, and I know it's been beating in previous generations as well, there's always been a conflict of like the importance of athletics and academics and where those roads cross and everything. But now, especially when you're talking about a conference that supposedly prides itself so heavily on academics, that is spending so much of their energy on this money portion of the athletic side, and you wonder about like what does the future look like with NIL and all these things. It's like, okay, they're fighting and maybe they win a battle right now, but like how much are they in it for the future as far as, this NIL era? Because I think the Big 12, we know they're going to go all in no matter what until they can't anymore as far as the sports side of it. But for the first time, not for the first time, because we've talked about Cal and Stanford and their interest in playing this game for however long they might. And that was a big topic because there's Washington State people that feel that same way of like, is this what we're supposed to be doing, throwing millions of dollars at athletes and like NIL and all this stuff? And so there's that, I think, sub-storyline for the Pac in particular that I think is very interesting.
Oh, I agree. I think it is really, really interesting. The other thing is academics, athletics, whatever, it all boils down to the one undefeated force in our capitalistic society is money.
Yes.
So at the end of the day, the only answer to the question is whatever the question you have about the Pac-12 is money. That's it. The only answer is money. So you can say academics, athletics, balance, this, that, and the other thing, endowment, blah, blah, blah. How much money are they going to have coming in because of this? And how much more money could they have if they made a different decision? That's the only thing it is. And everything else is superfluous to the one central topic of money.
Yeah, and I wonder just like in that area of like there's a different level of, I think, commitment and passion that's not a knock on the Pac-12 because they're pursuing I don't want to say one's pursuing academics and the other's not, but it's been like their bragging rights, is like we're superior academically and we're not belittling ourselves and we're not getting in the mud with these schools that don't take it as seriously, right? Like that's been a big war cry for them. And so to hear him talk about some of the rumblings from the academic side of Washington State and their fears about the direction that, all this is headed and whatnot, it just makes you wonder about like, okay, even if they survive another 5 years, like how many of those schools are in this NIL, you know what I'm saying? Like in this to win it and to be a part of it. And it made me wonder sitting there, not so much about the Pac-12's future, but like, does Stanford want to play this game for another 20 years and whatever that turns into? And so it was just really interesting to hear that part of it because it wasn't all about realignment and that. A big chunk of it was about NIL and the concerns about that and the NCAA and its future, lack thereof, and just all these other things that have a role that we don't necessarily sit down and think about all the time. But he brought up that there was a network that was ready to sign up and execute the deal, and then they thought it would be bad PR because of recent layoffs, so you can point to whoever you want to as far as that goes.
Stop for 1 second. ESPN's undergoing numerous layoffs, and Amazon announced it would eliminate 9,000 jobs.
Yeah.
So if those two are involved, Apple Plus, of course, is not. So just to interject those statistics or that comment while you're talking about it.
Yeah, so you can believe that if you want to or not. I mean, I'm sure there is some level of that it wouldn't be good for Amazon, for example, to turn around and be like, we just signed this multi-million-dollar deal with the Pac-12 after we laid off 3,000 people. And so there's some of that. I don't know how much stock I put into that all the way because I kind of feel like, what are they going to do about it? Like, are people going to be like, you know what? I'm boycotting the Pac-12. I cannot believe Amazon. I'm boycotting them too. I cannot believe they signed this new deal while other people are losing their jobs. You'd like to think that, but let's be realistic about it. I don't think that would be much more than a hiccup, but nice of them to think that way if, in fact, that's why there is a delay. I think there's probably something to that. I don't think that's the main reason necessarily. That's just me assuming based on what I heard and just like, okay, that kind of makes sense, but not all the way makes sense. It kind of sounds like a little bit of an excuse, so I'll meet you in the middle on that as far as that goes, because there is something to that. But
the Pac-12, though, is just one of the many things that would be messed up about layoffs
right.
in the corporate structure, because at some of these companies, the CEO is going to get a gigantic bonus.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, Jeff Bezos is going to fire 9,000 people at Amazon. Is Jeff Bezos going to cry a tear? Is he going to have to shut down one of his vacation homes or a rocket ship or anything? No. So again, the Pac-12 should not feel any kind of liberal responsibility to the proletariat at all on there. I think there's people way above the Pac-12 that are going to benefit way, way more from the 9,000 layoffs at Amazon than they ever would. And so I don't think that's kind of one of those things that feels like the higher ups say to put the Pac-12 off a little bit more, even though it's really not true. And you have to, what Craig's talking about is organizational direction. Like, what direction do you want to go to as an organization in the Pac-12 or anywhere? Like, this is going to spill over from the Pac-12 into other schools, because if you're Memphis, if you are even a team that winds up in a power conference after this round of shakeups is done, after 10 years, if you are so far behind, Georgia, that you can't even economically wrap your head around the math to catch up there, do you have to start going, well, how do we make this work for us?
Yeah, and I think that's what the Big 12's trying to figure out as well. And the ACC's dealing with is, what's the gap before we get back to the table? And the Big 12's like, how can we make up any room that we possibly can? And that's what I mean is, like, if it becomes so wide, and this is years down the line, but I think that if anybody was to say, you know what, we're out, I think it would be that side and that part of the country, that conference more so than anybody else. And so, like, obviously that's not anything that's in the works right now, but it's just something to be mindful of, I think, as all these rules change and the money's flowing the way that it is. If you talk about the haves and the have-nots or the super conference idea or whatever it is you want to, point out, and listen to that conversation, you hear that academic, like just the struggle that's going on of, like, are we a college, are we a university, or are we a pro sports franchise? And I think the Big 12 has shown that, like, they are, yes, on the academic side, but yeah, they're going to do whatever they can to, participate in athletics to the best of their ability. And the Pac is going to do the same. But I do think they're having a little bit more within their university walls, that struggle of, like, what is our identity? Are we getting too far away from it if we pursue, this remaining relevant in this type of an era? And so that was interesting just to hear him touch on. It didn't really have a lot to do with the Big 12 at all. But there were a lot of other things that he discussed, and he maintains that they're going to get a deal done, but the interruptions, obviously, with the cuts that are going on. And he probably watches this show. So shout out to Kirk Schultz or shows that are similar, because he admitted to that, because the realignment part of it was brought up, and he basically closed it all by saying that, he tried to kind of calm any fears and say, like, hey, we got our deal. There's this delay because there were, job cuts and it was bad optics. But, he touched on the streaming part of it and said, like, hey, there's going to be an element of that, yes. But, it wasn't like a huge deal. It wasn't like they were talking 100% all streaming or anything like that. But then, by the end of it, having, said, like, well, I listen to shows and I get where people are coming from, and, there's this and there's that's going on. He did say that the Pac-12 is going to be fine, but that the longer this drags on, he understands people that are like, what's the contract figure, what's the network, and how long are the years, and is anybody signing a grant of rights? And until they hear that, he understands why people are going to be skeptical. So for him to acknowledge that, I think, was important, because it's not nothing, like I said. And he understands, too, that there is this outside chatter that's growing and building, and probably a little bit uncomfortable for them at times, or an annoyance at times. But he gets it, because there's not a grant of rights that we know is in the works. There's not a contract right now. There's not a network right now outside of the ones they're negotiating with, but as far as signed on paper. And so until that happens, like these conversations, like every other conversation, until that happens, he knows, like we know, and like we've stated over and over again, the talk's going to continue. And the only thing that'll bring it to a close is when we know all those details that he mentioned.
Connor Johnson, who is